The fluorescent lights didn't flicker. They held, steady, cold, bright enough to see every face in that corridor, bright enough to see exactly what was about to happen. And no one looked away. He walked up to her like the hallway belonged to him, like the air belonged to him. Radio clipped to his belt, shoulders squared, the kind of man who had spent years learning that presence alone could shut a room down. It worked on everyone else. He stopped close. Too close. The kind of distance that isn't accidental. She didn't step back. He reached forward, grabbed the lanyard, and pulled. Hard. The plastic clip cracked against the badge housing. The sound carried down the corridor like a single gunshot. Clean, sharp, definitive. He held it up. Not to her, to the room, to every nurse, every orderly, every person standing in that hallway pretending they weren't watching. "She's gone," he said. 2 words, and the way he said them, low, certain, final, it sounded like a door slamming shut. The corridor went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. A few people shifted their weight. One junior staff member looked down at the floor and kept looking. This was over. That's what it felt like. Except she didn't move either. She just stood there, perfectly still. Not the kind of still that comes from shock, not the kind that comes from fear, the kind that comes from someone who has already run through every version of this moment in their head, every possible outcome, every card on the table, and none of them frighten her. He waved the badge again, slow, deliberate, making sure the point landed. She watched him do it. And then she did something that no one in that corridor expected. Nothing. No argument, no plea, no raise in her voice. She just looked at him, the way you look at someone when you already know how the next hour ends. He didn't see it. He thought he had won. He was wrong. Because something was already moving, something that had been set in motion long before he walked up to her, something with a code black classification on it, something with a heartbeat inside it that this woman had fought to keep beating before, once, maybe more than once. And when it arrived, when it came through those doors at the end of that corridor, every single person standing there was going to understand exactly how badly this man had miscalculated. He didn't know it yet, and she wasn't going to tell him. Not yet. Not until it was too late for it to matter. If you want to know what was coming down that corridor and who she really is, stay with me. You're watching this for a reason. Hit subscribe now and drop where you're watching from in the comments, because this story isn't done yet. The 2 guards moved in at the same time. Not fast, controlled, the way they'd been trained to handle a quiet removal. 1 on each side, hands open, no contact yet, just presence. She watched them approach, and she didn't move. Not a step back, not a shift in weight, nothing. The guard on the left hesitated, just a fraction, enough to notice. "Ma'am?" he started. She didn't look at him. She was looking at the supervisor, still holding the badge, still standing where he'd planted himself like the corridor was his floor plan. "I'm not leaving," she said. No edge, no volume, just a fact laid down in front of them like a file on a desk. The supervisor's jaw tightened. "Take her," he said. The guard reached for her arm. She didn't pull away. She also didn't give him anything to work with. Her body stayed exactly where it was, dead weight without resistance. The kind of stillness that makes a physical removal into a scene. And then the alarm hit. Not a standard tone, not the routine pulse that runs through a hospital every few minutes like a heartbeat no one listens to anymore. This was hard, flat, layered, a code black transport alarm, the kind that meant something was incoming from outside the building, military or federal, no advance notice, no margin for delay. The corridor flinched. Everyone heard it. Everyone knew what it meant. The guards knew it. The charge nurse at the desk knew it. Even the supervisor knew it, somewhere underneath the part of him that had already committed to this moment. He didn't stop. "Get her out," he said again, louder now, not because he needed to be heard, because he needed to be obeyed. The guard's hand stayed on her arm, but he didn't pull. She turned her head, not toward the supervisor, toward the charge nurse, the one sitting at the station 20 feet away, watching everything without speaking. And she spoke, quietly, clinically, the way someone speaks when the words matter more than the tone. "When they bring him in, he will arrest twice if they push propofol. Stabilize first, then intubate." The charge nurse didn't blink, but her hand, the one resting on the desk, stopped moving. That was the crack. Small, silent. No one else caught it. The supervisor was already turning back to the guards, already recalculating how to force the removal without causing a scene that would make the incoming transport harder to manage. He didn't see it. He didn't see the charge nurse's eyes move to the alarm panel, didn't see the slight recalibration happening behind her expression, didn't see that one sentence land the way a single correct reading lands in a room full of people who suddenly aren't sure they trust the person giving the orders. The alarm kept pulsing. Something was close now. Minutes away. Maybe less. The supervisor looked at the guards, at her, at the corridor full of people who were no longer quite as still as they had been. He made his decision. Remove her. Now. He was fully committed. And that was the second mistake. The doors at the end of the corridor blew open. Not swung. Blew. The kind of force that comes from a gurney hitting them at speed with no one slowing down to wait for them to open. 2 paramedics, 1 trauma doc already running to meet them, the gurney between them moving fast, wheels locked into that controlled glide that meant every second was being counted. The man on it was conscious. That was wrong. With the amount of blood visible through the dressings on his chest, he should have been somewhere between barely there and gone. But his eyes were open, scanning, tracking, too aware for someone who, close to the edge. The guards were still on either side of her. Neither of them had moved her. The gurney passed through the corridor like a pressure wave. Staff flattened against the walls. Monitors beeped from somewhere behind the doors. The trauma doc was already calling out orders, rattling off a sequence that the charge nurse at the desk was already anticipating. And then the patient's eyes found her. He locked on. Through the guards. Through the chaos, through everything moving around him, and he spoke. Not loud, not desperate, clear. "Don't touch my airway," he said. "Where's Holt?" The corridor didn't stop, but it slowed. The trauma doc turned. The charge nurse looked up. One of the paramedics glanced sideways. The name hung in the air like something solid. Holt. He wasn't asking for a doctor. He wasn't asking for the team. He was asking for her, specifically, by name, the way someone asks for the one person they trust to keep them breathing. The supervisor stepped forward. "This staff member has been terminated," he said. Firm, authoritative, the tone of a man who needed the room to remember who was running things. The patient turned his head. Just enough. He looked at the supervisor the way a man looks at someone who has just said something genuinely stupid. And then he laughed. One sharp sound, painful, bleeding through it. "You have no idea what you just did," he said. The corridor tightened. No one spoke. She moved, one step forward, away from the guards. They didn't stop her. not this time. She moved like someone walking back into a room she had never really left. Calm, familiar, expected. He was shot through the chest, she said. Not to the patient, to the trauma doc. 12 minutes ago. If you intubate now, you collapse the lung. Stabilize first. The trauma doc opened his mouth. Closed it. Because she was right. He knew she was right. The readings on the portable monitor confirmed it. The blood pressure confirmed it. The way the patient was breathing confirmed it. They followed her instructions. They stabilized him first. It worked. The patient's vitals steadied. The pressure held. The room exhaled without anyone actually exhaling. That was the first proof. Not words, not a claim, not a story. An outcome. A life that kept going because she had been right, and everyone in that corridor had just watched it happen. The supervisor watched it too. Then he shook his head, once, small. The gesture of the man refusing to let a single moment crack the wall he had already built. Coincidence, he said, quietly, to no one in particular. He turned back to the guards. She's still not staff. Get her out of here. The patient was moved. The gurney disappeared through the next set of doors. The trauma doc went with it, not looking back. But the charge nurse was still looking at the supervisor. And so was everyone else. The authority was still his, but it didn't feel the same anymore. The corridor should have gone back to normal. It didn't. The supervisor felt it, the shift, the way the room had changed temperature without anyone moving or speaking. He felt it, and it made him angry. He turned to her. "You're still here," he said. She didn't answer. Didn't need to. She was standing exactly where she had been, exactly where she had stepped forward to save that man's life. She hadn't moved an inch since. "I told you to leave," he said. Still nothing. He looked at the guards. A signal. Do it again. The guard on the left took one step toward her, then stopped. Not because she had done anything. She hadn't. She was still, hands at her sides, eyes forward, offering no resistance and no retreat. He stopped because the charge nurse spoke. "She hasn't been escorted off the floor yet," she said, flat, careful, the kind of statement that sounds like a question without asking one. The supervisor turned. "That's what I'm trying to do." Procedure requires a written termination form, signed, time-stamped. I haven't seen one. Silence. It wasn't defiance. It was too quiet for that, too measured, but it landed exactly where it needed to. The supervisor's jaw moved. He didn't answer immediately, because the charge nurse was right, and everyone in the corridor knew it, and he knew they knew it. He recovered fast. "This is a security matter," he said, "not an HR question." "It's both," the charge nurse said. And then she stopped talking, because she didn't need to say more. The supervisor looked around the corridor, at the staff who had stopped pretending to walk past, at the orderly near the supply closet who had found a reason to linger, at the two nurses by the station who were watching him with an expression that was not quite fear anymore. It was something worse. It was doubt. He straightened, recalibrated, chose the move that felt most like authority. "She violated protocol," he said. To the room. To no one. To himself. "Her presence here is a risk to this floor." She spoke then. Quiet, steady. The same voice she had used to save the man on the gurney. "I'm not leaving, and you know why." He didn't know why, not really. He knew what he could see. A nurse who wouldn't go, a room that wouldn't back him up, a decision he had made in public that was starting to look less like authority and more like a mistake someone was going to hold over him for a very long time. He opened his mouth to respond. He didn't get the chance. A man walked into the corridor from the far end. No rush, no announcement, civilian clothes, dark jacket. Nothing on his chest, no visible identification, nothing that marked him as belonging to this building or the system. He carried a folder in one hand, a radio in the other. The radio was not hospital issue. The frequency it was tuned to was not hospital frequency. He walked in like someone who already knew the layout, already knew who was standing where, already knew exactly what had happened in the last 20 minutes. He stopped, looked at the supervisor, looked at her. Then he spoke. "Who's in charge here?" The supervisor pointed to himself, without hesitation, without thinking. That was the third mistake. The man didn't react to the answer, didn't nod, didn't write anything down, just looked at the supervisor the way someone looks at a door they're about to walk through without asking for permission. "Good," he said. "Then explain something for me." He didn't open the folder. Not yet. He held it at his side, like it was an afterthought, like the words he was about to say mattered more than anything inside it. "Why did you terminate a classified medical asset during an active transport?" The word landed. Classified. It didn't echo. It didn't need to. It just sat there in the middle of the corridor, like something heavy placed on a table. Everyone felt the weight of it. No one touched it. The supervisor blinked. Then he laughed. Short, dismissive. The kind of laugh that's supposed to make the other person look foolish. "This is a hospital, not a military base. I have full authority over this floor." The man nodded. Slowly, like he was considering the statement seriously. "That's where your authority ends," he said. "No aggression, no threat, just a line drawn, clear as glass." The supervisor held his ground. He was good at that. It was the one thing that had carried him this far, the ability to stand where he was and refuse to be moved by anything short of a direct order from someone above him. But this man wasn't above him. Not visibly, not officially. He had no badge, no rank, nothing that placed him inside the structure the supervisor understood. And that was exactly the problem. "You want to tell me who you are?" the supervisor said. "No," the man said. Simple. Final. The way she had said things earlier. Not rude, not cold, just a door that wasn't going to open. The supervisor looked at the folder, at the radio, at the man's hands, which were completely relaxed, the way hands are relaxed when the person holding them has done this before, many times, in rooms exactly like this one. He looked at her. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't looked at the man once since he entered. She was watching the supervisor, watching him the same way she had watched him from the beginning, patient, unhurried, already knowing. Her silence wasn't weakness. It never had been. It was discipline, the kind that comes from knowing exactly when to speak and when to let someone else do the work for you. She had made her case in the corridor. She had made it with one sentence to the charge nurse. She had made it with the patient on the gurney. Now, she didn't need to make it again. The man was making it for her. The supervisor turned back to him, recalculated, chose the move that felt most defensible. "She violated protocol," he said. "I acted within my authority to enforce it. Whatever you think you know about the situation, I don't think," the man said. He lifted the radio, held it close enough to speak into without raising his voice. "Command. Confirm identity. Nurse Holt, prior designation." The radio crackled once. Then silence. The corridor held its breath. The supervisor watched the radio, watched the man's face, watched for any sign that this was a bluff, any crack, any tell. There was none. The radio spoke. But that confirmation, what it said and what it meant, was still coming. And when it did, nothing in that corridor was going to stay the same. The voice that came back through the radio was not loud. It didn't need to be. "Confirmed. Nurse Holt, prior designation active. Stand down." 2 sentences. That was all it took. No drama, no explanation, No context given to the people standing in that corridor who had just watched a man's entire authority fold in on itself, like a structure that had been hollow from the start. The truth didn't arrive with force. It arrived through procedure, clean, official, verified by someone none of them could see, speaking from somewhere none of them could reach, and it landed harder than any confrontation could have. The supervisor didn't move. For a long moment, he just stood there. Radio still crackling faintly in the man's hand, badge still gripped in his own, the corridor still watching. His face didn't drain all at once. It happened in stages, like a tide going out. First the color, then the certainty, then the expression he had been holding since the moment he first reached for her lanyard. Gone. All of it. The man let the silence hold for exactly as long as it needed. Not longer. He wasn't cruel. He was precise. He let the room understand what had just happened before he said another word. Then he spoke. Not to the corridor, to the supervisor. Direct. Close. The same distance the supervisor had stood from her at the beginning. The same proximity. The same weight of presence. "You will return her badge," he said. The supervisor's hand tightened around it, one last reflex, one last grip on something that had already stopped belonging to him. "You will file no report. You will leave this floor. Now." The supervisor looked around. For support. For someone to push back. For any crack in the room that would let him hold his position for one more minute. There was nothing. The charge nurse looked away, not of pity, out of something colder. The guards had already stepped back. The staff along the walls had gone completely still, the way people go still when they are watching something they want to remember. His hand opened. The badge dropped into his palm, face down. He held it out, not to her, to the man, because looking at her directly was the one thing he could not bring himself to do. She took it herself, stepped forward, lifted it from his fingers, clipped it back onto her lanyard. The break in the plastic was still visible, a clean crack running through the housing where he had snapped it earlier. She didn't fix it. She didn't need to. The supervisor stood there for 3 more seconds. Then he turned. No final word, no recovery attempt, no version of this moment that let him walk away intact. He just walked. Down the corridor, past the station, past the charge nurse who did not look up, past the guards who did not move. The sound of his footsteps faded, and the corridor exhaled. The man clipped the radio back onto his belt, closed the folder he had never opened. He looked at her. She nodded. Once. But the corridor was still watching. And what happened next, whether the truth stayed where it had landed, or whether the system tried to bury it, that question was still open. The corridor didn't empty all at once. People drifted, one by one. Back to stations, back to tasks, back to the rhythm of a hospital night that had been cracked open and was now slowly trying to remember its shape. But the rhythm was different now. No one spoke about what had happened. Not out loud, not yet. It was too fresh for that, too strange. The kind of moment that sits inside a room for hours before anyone finds the language to describe it. The charge nurse was the first to move with purpose. She stood from the desk, picked up a chart, set it down again, picked up another. Her hands were steady, but her eyes kept drifting to the corridor, to the space where the supervisor had been standing, like she was checking to make sure it was still empty. It was. The man in civilian clothes lingered. He didn't leave with the supervisor. He stayed where he was, near the station, folder still closed in his hand, watching her. Not with urgency, with something quieter than that. She was already moving back toward the ward, badge clipped on, broken lanyard and all, walking the way she had walked at the start of every shift before tonight. Head down, pace measured. The kind of movement that says nothing and does everything. He fell into step beside her, matched her pace without making it obvious. "You could take this further," he said. Not a suggestion, an option, laid out the way someone lays out a tool on a table. "Here it is, yours to pick up or leave." She didn't slow down. "I know," she said. "There are people who would listen." He crossed a line that has paperwork attached to it. Real paperwork. The kind that ends careers. "I know that too." He waited. She didn't say anything else for several steps. The corridor hummed around them. Monitors beeped behind closed doors. A trolley rattled somewhere 2 floors up. Then she spoke. He learned what he needed to learn. The man looked at her, studied the way she said it. Not as mercy, not as forgiveness, as a calculation. The same kind of calculation she had made in the corridor when he first reached for her badge. She had already weighed this, already decided. Escalation would have made the story about her. This kept it about him. He understood. He noted once, didn't push it. They reached the ward entrance. She paused, checked the board on the wall. 3 patients still under observation. 1 post-op, 1 waiting on labs, 1 she had flagged before the shift turned sideways. Normal work, the kind that had been waiting for her the entire time. She turned back to him, just her head, just enough. "Thank you," she said. He nodded again. Then he stepped back, gave her the space, let her disappear through the ward doors the way she had disappeared into every other shift before tonight. Quiet, invisible. Except now, the floor knew. Every person who had stood in that corridor understood something they hadn't understood before, about who she was, about what authority actually meant when someone tested it. And the question that sat in the air after she was gone, the one no one said but everyone felt, was whether this floor would stay the same, or whether what they had seen tonight would start to change things. Slowly, quietly, the way she did everything. By the next morning, 3 things had changed. No one announced them. No memo, no meeting, no explanation delivered in the careful language that hospitals use when they want to sound like they are fixing something without admitting anything was broken. The changes just appeared. The first was the security rotation schedule. New names on the overnight board, the same shifts, the same hours, different faces. The kind of adjustment that takes a phone call and a signature and leaves no trail unless someone is looking for one. No one looked. The second was a policy note posted quietly on the internal system at 6:14 in the morning. Termination procedures, updated language around public enforcement, witness documentation requirements. It read like a routine update. It wasn't. Anyone who had been in that corridor the night before would have seen exactly what it was responding to. But it didn't say his name, didn't reference the incident, didn't point to anything specific. That was the point. The system had absorbed the shock, filed it somewhere internal, processed it the way systems process things that are too visible to ignore and too awkward to acknowledge, quietly, procedurally, without fault assigned to anyone. The third change was harder to name. It lived in the way people moved around her. Not differently, not obviously. She walked the same corridors, checked the same charts, spoke to the same patients in the same low, steady voice she had always used. Nothing about her manner shifted, nothing about her routine changed. But the people around her noticed. The charge nurse asked her opinion on a medication adjustment before the attending did. Not because protocol required it, because she trusted the answer more. A junior nurse hesitated before making a call on a patient intake, looked across the station, waited for her to glance up, got a single nod, proceeded with confidence. Small things, invisible things. The kind of authority that doesn't announce itself and doesn't need to. The supervisor's absence was felt the way a draft is felt. Not seen, just there. A space where something used to stand that no one acknowledged was empty. His name stayed on internal rosters for another 48 hours before it was quietly removed. No exit interview was mentioned. No reason was given. The building moved on, but it moved on differently. She finished her shift at 7:22 in the morning, checked her last patient, signed off the handover notes, clipped her badge, still cracked, still visibly broken, back onto the hook by the locker. She didn't fix it. Someone had left a new lanyard on her locker, still in the packaging, no note attached. She looked at it for a moment. Then she left it where it was. The corridor was empty as she walked toward the exit. Early light came through the windows at the far end, the kind of light that makes a hospital look less like a hospital and more like a place where people are just trying to get through the night. She had done that. Tonight and every night before it. The badge on her chest still carried the crack, visible to anyone who looked close enough. And now, everyone would. Dawn came in slow, the kind of morning light that doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps, edges and through windows, softens the harsh whites of the corridor into something almost warm. She walked through it without hurrying. Badge on her chest, cracked lanyard, same posture she had carried through every shift before this one. Shoulders level, eyes forward, the kind of woman you pass in a hallway and don't remember 5 minutes later. Except, now, if you had been there last night, you would remember. Not because she had changed, because you finally saw what had always been there. The automatic doors opened. She stepped through. The air outside was cool. Still dark enough to carry the last edge of night, but light enough to see the parking lot. The day shift was arriving. Cars pulling in, people walking in with coffee and badges, and the ordinary wait of another morning. They didn't know what had happened inside. Not yet. She didn't tell them. She walked past without slowing down, past the entrance, past the bench where someone had left a jacket draped over the back, past the small patch of grass that was still wet from overnight rain. She didn't look back at the building, not out of anger, not out of relief, out of the same quiet discipline that had kept her standing in that corridor when every other instinct in the room was telling her to leave. She had done what needed to be done, nothing more. That was the part most people would never understand, the part that made her different from the supervisor in a way that had nothing to do with rank or classification or whatever file the operative had been carrying. He had taken the badge because he believed it was power. He was wrong. The badge was never the source of it. It was a piece of plastic on a lanyard. It opened doors, it identified a person. It meant nothing beyond that. What the supervisor had missed, what he had fundamentally, irreversibly miscalculated, was that power in that corridor had never been attached to what he held in his hand. It was attached to what she knew, what she could do, what she had done before, what the man on that gurney already understood when he looked at her and asked for her by name, not because she wore a badge, because she had earned something that no badge could carry and no supervisor could strip away. Trust. The real kind. Not the kind that comes from a title or a uniform or a radio on your belt. The kind that is built in the moments no one sees, in the quiet decisions made at 3 in the morning when the corridor is empty and no one is watching. She had built it over years. He had tried to destroy it in seconds. It didn't work. The parking lot was filling up now, headlights cutting through the last of the gray. She found her car, unlocked it, sat down, didn't start it right away. She looked at the badge one more time. The crack ran clean across the plastic, a line that marked exactly where it had broken, visible, permanent, something that couldn't be erased or rewritten or filed away. A record. Not of what he had done to her, of what he had failed to understand. She clipped it back onto the visor mirror, sat there for a moment, watching the building through the windshield. Somewhere inside, a shift was starting. Patients were waking up, decisions were being made, authority was being tested in small ways, every hour, by every person in that building. Most of them would never know how close it had come to breaking. She started the car and drove away. Quiet, invisible, the way she had always been. the way that mattered most. That's where the story ends, but the question doesn't. You watched the whole thing. You know what happened in that corridor. Now do something with it. Subscribe. Drop where you're watching from in the comments. And if you think she made the right call, say it. Because not everyone will.